June 4, 1942. Midway Atoll, a small, sun-baked cluster of islands surrounded by the endless blue of the Pacific. The morning sky was clear, but the calm didn't last. Within minutes, it was torn apart by the thunder of engines and the shriek of diving bombers. The USS Yorktown, call sign CV-5, was fighting for her life. From the flight deck, smoke curled up like black ribbons into the blinding sunlight. Crewmen, faces streaked with oil and sweat, sprinted across the deck, shouting over the roar of anti-aircraft guns. The Japanese strike force, relentless and precise, had found their mark. A direct bomb hit near the island superstructure sent a wave of fire and twisted metal across the deck. Damage control sealed the compartments. A voice yelled through the intercom. Inside the ship's bowels, sailors sloshed through waste, deep water, sealing hatches as the sound of tearing steel echoed through the corridors. The Yorktown's heart, her engines and power systems flickered, then died. The ship listed sharply to port. For a moment, it seemed she would join the Pacific graveyard, but on the bridge, Captain Elliot Buckmaster refused to surrender. He ordered all hands to remain at their stations. "We're not done yet," he barked. The ship's crew, trained for catastrophe, moved with surgical precision. Pumps roared to life. Fires were smothered. Damaged sections were isolated. Within an hour, the Yorktown, though wounded and limping, was still afloat. Far above, Japanese reconnaissance aircraft circled, sending back triumphant messages to Admiral Nagumo's flagship. Yorktown destroyed. The Japanese commanders celebrated. One of America's prized carriers gone, or so they believed. But down below in those smoke-choked corridors, the men of Yorktown were doing the impossible. They were rebuilding their ship, while the battle still raged around them. By late afternoon, the Pacific sun dipped low, painting the sea in streaks of red and gold, but the Yorktown still stood. Her flight deck was scorched, her radar crippled, and several compartments were flooded. Yet, the ship's heartbeat, faint but steady, pulsed through the hull. In the engineering decks, Chief Petty Officer James McCandless led a crew of grease, stained sailors armed with hammers, acetylene torches, and sheer determination. "She's not dead till we say she's dead," he growled, wiping grime from his brow. They scavenged every usable scrap of metal, patching ruptures with whatever they could find, even spare mess hall trays. On the bridge, Captain Buckmaster coordinated with the damage control teams, his voice hoarse from shouting over the chaos. "Get those pumps running. I want every man with a wrench down below." Every minute mattered. Every decision teetered between survival and disaster. Meanwhile, word spread through the fleet. Yorktown was still alive. The nearby carrier Enterprise sent over assistance teams, carrying pumps, welding gear, and medical supplies. Helicopters and small craft ferried men between the ships, despite the constant threat of another Japanese attack. As twilight deepened, the crew managed to restore partial power. The ship's engines groaned, coughing black smoke from their stacks. For the first time since the morning assault, the great carrier began to move under her own power. A ragged cheer broke out among the exhausted sailors. Hundreds of miles away, aboard the Japanese carrier Akagi, Admiral Nagumo received his latest reconnaissance report. His pilots had sworn Yorktown was gone sunk and burning. Yet now, reports suggested an American carrier was still operational. Impossible, he thought. No ship could take that kind of punishment and fight again in the same battle. But Yorktown wasn't just fighting, she was hunting. Her repaired flight deck now launched dauntless dive, bombers limping but lethal. The ship the Japanese believed was a ghost had come back to haunt them. June 4, 1942, the Battle of Midway was over, but the Yorktown's war was far from finished. After withstanding 2 full waves of Japanese air assaults, the battered carrier was barely afloat. Her decks were blackened, her crew exhausted, and her engines faltering. She was towed to Pearl Harbor a wreck, but not a loss. When she arrived, even hardened dockworkers stopped in their tracks. The sight was shocking. Holes ripped through her hull, melted metal hanging like torn flesh, and the smell of burned oil heavy in the air. But before the echoes of her damage had even settled, the order came down from Admiral Nimitz himself: get her ready. She sails again. 72 hours. That was the impossible deadline. The men at Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard worked around the clock in 3 continuous shifts. Over 1,400 workers swarmed the Yorktown, welding, hammering, cutting, and reassembling. Sparks rained like fireflies through the night as acetylene torches carved away twisted steel. Divers patched holes underwater, while electricians rerouted fried circuits through any line that would carry a charge. Some slept on deck, their faces smeared with soot. Others never slept at all. The workers knew what was at stake. The next great battle of the Pacific was imminent. Every hour saved could mean thousands of lives spared. One welder, George Greeley, later recalled, "We didn't see her as just a ship. She was a symbol. If she could rise again, maybe we all could." By the morning of June 6th, the Yorktown was ready. Not perfect, not pristine, but alive. Her patched hull was ugly. Her systems were temperamental. But she could float, launch planes, and fight. Against all odds, the ship that should have taken months to repair was combat, ready in just 3 days. As she sailed out once again, the workers lined the docks, saluting the carrier that refused to die. One sailor shouted over the roar of the engines, "They said she sank, let's prove them wrong." June 6, 1942, just 3 days after her miraculous rebirth, the USS Yorktown steamed into position north of Midway Island, joining the U.S. Carrier Task Force under Rear Admiral Frank Jack Fletcher. The sea was calm, but every man aboard felt the tension humming through the decks like static before a storm. Below deck, sailors whispered about the rumors spreading through the fleet that the Japanese believed the Yorktown had been sunk at Coral Sea. Let them think that. One petty officer grinned, tightening a bolt on an arresting cable. Ghost ships fight harder. At dawn, the comm shattered. Japanese reconnaissance planes spotted the American carriers Enterprise, Hornet, and, unbelievably, the Yorktown. When the report reached the Japanese flagship Akagi, Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo stared in disbelief. "Impossible," he muttered. Yorktown was destroyed. His officers agreed. Some thought it must be a new carrier, a twin sister ship America had kept hidden. Others whispered about trickery, a decoy, or deception. None could believe the truth. The same ship had returned from the dead. Within hours, the skies over Midway turned black with planes. Dive. Bombers screamed down like hawks, their shadows darting across the ocean surface. The Yorktown launched her fighters F-4F Wildcats to intercept. Below, her anti-aircraft gunners braced at their stations, tracking the approaching dots through the haze. When the first Japanese bombs hit, the shock rippled through the hull. Fires erupted, men were thrown off their feet, and black smoke poured into the Pacific sky. But this time, the Yorktown didn't falter. Crews rushed to contain the flames, sealing bulkheads and rerouting power. The ship fought back with everything it had left her flight deck, shuddering under the thunder of takeoffs and explosions. Aboard the Japanese carrier Hyrie, pilots radioed in disbelief. "The Yorktown lives. She is fighting again." In Tokyo, intelligence officers pored over the reports, convinced the Americans must have built a second Yorktown-class carrier overnight. They couldn't comprehend that the same ship, hammered, burned, and broken, had been resurrected by sheer determination. For hours she endured. For every bomb that struck her, another aircraft lifted off her deck. Her gunners downed enemy planes even as fires burned at their backs. One sailor later said, "It was like she refused to go down, as if she knew the whole damn war was watching." By late afternoon, the Yorktown was burning again. The Japanese had sent yet another wave of torpedo bombers from Hyrie, desperate to finish what they thought was a phantom ship. The ocean around her boiled with white foam as torpedoes cut through the waves, closing the distance with eerie precision. Aboard the carrier, Captain Elliot Buckmaster stood on the bridge, his face illuminated by firelight and the dull red glow of battle alarms. "Steady as she goes," he ordered, voice calm but heavy. The helmsman nodded, gripping the wheel. There was nowhere to run. 2 torpedoes slammed into the port side, one striking near the engine room. The deck lurched violently. Men were thrown against bulkheads. Power flickered and died. Below, compartments flooded instantly, trapping dozens of sailors. Yet even as water poured in, others rushed toward the flames, carrying hoses and extinguishers, refusing to abandon their posts. Buckmaster gave the order to prepare to abandon ship only when the Yorktown began to list dangerously. "We've done all we can," he said softly. Around him, the bridge crew stood silently, knowing they had given everything. Destroyers moved in close to take survivors. Some men wept as they looked back, their ship still afloat, her proud hull silhouetted against a burning sunset. She wouldn't sink easily. For another full day, she remained stubbornly upright, her flag fluttering defiantly in the smoke. But fate wasn't done. A Japanese submarine, I-168, slipped through the screen of U.S. destroyers and fired 4 torpedoes. One struck the crippled Yorktown, and another sank the destroyer Hamon, which was helping her. The explosion ripped through the sea, scattering debris and men alike. On June 7th, after a final silent struggle, the Yorktown rolled slowly to her side. Her stern rose high above the waves before slipping beneath, the American flag still flying. The ocean swallowed her whole, but not her legacy. The Japanese were stunned. Their intelligence reports insisted the Yorktown had been destroyed at Coral Sea. Yet she had reappeared and fought, as if resurrected. The myth spread through their ranks that the Americans had built a ship that could repair itself mid-battle for the U.S. Navy. The truth was even more extraordinary. It wasn't steel or technology that had rebuilt the Yorktown, it was the hands of men, the will of sailors, and a nation that refused to stop fighting. Months later, Admiral Chester Nimitz would call her crew's effort a miracle of courage and endurance. To many, she became the symbol of America's resilience, the ship that refused to die. And to this day, when historians speak of Midway's turning tide, they remember not just the carriers that fought, but the one that rose from the ashes to fight twice.